Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner. And joining me today, as he so often does, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. Andrew, I'm sure you guys can already tell by the title, we're here to talk a little bit of Carolina basketball. Carolina's got a tough 7-game stretch coming up, but we're going to kind of focus on the next three in particular, all of which are on the road, kind of talk about some of the challenges that have come along with that and where the Heels are at right now. Little background, though. Carolina obviously getting the win over NC State on Saturday in Chapel Hill. Carolina's now won 5 of its last 6. So the Heels in a pretty good place, but focusing on this 3-game stretch, play at Pittsburgh on Tuesday night, and they got at Clemson and at Duke. So a bit of a tough 3-game stretch for the Tar Heels, AJ. I know Pitt's kind of been up and down a little bit this year, but Justin Champagnie, for instance, is one of the top players in the league right now, and Pitt's a solid team. You also look at Clemson, who at one point were kind of top of the ACC. I know they've been struggling a little bit as of late, but still a really good team. And Duke's sitting at 500 right now, but Duke Carolina, that's always going to be a tough game. All 3 of those on the road. Looking at Carolina, what they've been able to do recently and going into this stretch, AJ, how difficult of a stretch do you think it will be for this team, and kind of what's the importance of it? Because, this is kind of going to be, in my opinion, kind of the make or break for the Heels if they can get through this, daunting 3-game stretch, and then there's a tough 4-game period after that as well.
Well, this stretch does not appear as daunting as it did 36 hours ago, and certainly a week ago when I wrote that column about how huge this past week was. Like, they had to take care of business against Wake State, and they had to get better, and they did that because they had to get themselves in position to be able to navigate through this 7-game stretch that they're starting Tuesday night at Pittsburgh. But honestly, the other thing that we've said for a while, Jacob, is that there are a lot of winnable games in this league.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the league's not very good this year. There's a lot of solid teams and a lot of teams that can rise up and play pretty well in a given night. Yeah. But there are a lot of teams that are very flawed. And the next 3 teams they played have flaws. Now, right now, I would say Pittsburgh is the best of the 3. Mm-hmm. That's because Pitt's coming off a win last week over Duke, and Pitt has played fairly well. But Pitt just lost to Wake Forest.
Yeah,
Wake Forest, I know Wake has been competitive, and I think Steve Forbes is doing a pretty good job in a very difficult situation there. Mm-hmm. Wake had to get 8 threes from Assad in order to beat Pitt, and Pitt was actually up 10 in the first half in that game at one point. So you lose to Wake. I don't know what the heck that means. Does it mean that, well, they're a club that's pretty good one night, not so good the next? I don't really know. I would think that Carolina going into Peterson Event Center, even with no crowd, the Panthers are going to be ready to go. They certainly, the way they play, can present problems for Carolina. They're very athletic. Xavier Johnson's an older guard. Older guards have given this team trouble in the past.
Yeah, they have.
I think Tony is a really nice player who can get the big rebound games. He can score. But of course, you mentioned Champagnie, who might be the front runner for ACC Player of the Year. They kind of have 3 guys that if they all 3 play really well, Pitt has a chance to win. If one of them doesn't, then suddenly Pitt's a lot more beatable. They have other dudes, but they're more just dudes. They're not like the guy that they're not Champagnie, they're not Tony, and they're not Johnson. So I think Carolina could go up there and win that game, but the Tar Heels have to play really, really well like they did in the second half against Wake and like they did for 2 halves offensively against State, minus the turnovers. We got to hit a few more perimeter shots. It's really simple right now. Mm-hmm. The thing that I think that most Carolina fans should have gotten out of this past week and use that to kind of snapshot looking ahead, they must respect the interior. They must be committed to going inside. When they started doing that at halftime, with that long halftime talk against Wake, they've shot over 50% since then. 3 halves since then, 43 or more points since then. Even with the turnovers in the second half against State, even with the missed free throws, they still scored 43 points in both halves. So they have to be that team moving forward. If they leave that escapes them. It doesn't matter who they play the rest of the way. They can lose. That's the other side about the ACC. Every game is pretty much winnable except going to Charlottesville. I don't think this team right now would go there and beat them. And I think Florida State's going to be a tough task for a lot of people too. I think those 2 are going to separate themselves. Everybody else is beatable, but I think until this Carolina team shows that it has become very consistent playing at the level that it has been the last 3 halves, it can lose to pretty much everybody too. So you asked me how big this is, what's important about these next 3 games. I think it was a 3-game stretch that a week and a half ago, people thought, boy, they're going to be lucky to win one of those games.
Yeah.
Now I think as a whole. They could win each one. Will they win all three? I doubt it. But in order for in order for Clemson and Duke to beat Carolina or beat anybody right now, they have to play a lot better.
Yeah,
and those two teams are struggling. Well, we're going to get into them here a little bit more here in a minute, but I think right now Carolina's chances of getting through this 7-game stretch and certainly these next two in the road are a lot better than I thought they were 4 or 5 days ago.
Yeah, I could agree. Like I said earlier, we've talked about it. Carolina's won 5 out of its last 6, but I mean, they haven't. You talked about the past couple of games, the past 3 halves. Carolina's looked good in those halves for the most part. But, even in some of those wins, Notre Dame sticks out on my mind. I mean, that was one of the worst games I've watched this season, period. I mean, it just was not a fun game to watch. Carolina did not look good in that game. Notre Dame did not look very good either. Syracuse, Carolina had some nice things. I mean, Garrison had a good game against them, but, against Syracuse, Carolina wasn't great. So I think when you look at this Carolina team, you're saying, okay, over the last couple games, it's improved. Over the last 3 halves, it's kind of, you're seeing Caleb Love play a little bit better. You're seeing Caleb Love kind of look like Caleb Love. And, it's no coincidence that when he's hitting shots, this team's a lot better. I mean, Carolina scored 86 points against NC State on Saturday. There was a point this season, not too long ago, where we were lucky if Carolina broke 70, from watching.
They've been over 80 in 3 of the last 4. And the one they weren't had 75 at Florida State, which is an outstanding defensive team.
Exactly.
They're getting it together offensively. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly. And so you're looking at it in terms of the 5 of the last 6. And like I said, Carolina hasn't played great now. They've gotten better over the past 3 halves in particular, which I think is one of the reasons, based on what you've kind of said, that you're feeling a little bit better as Carolina goes into this stretch, about how that maybe, you said, they're lucky if they get, 1 win out of there, maybe. I think that changes a little bit now, especially when you look at how bad Clemson and Duke have been as of recent. Let's talk about Pitt for a second, just hone in on that one.
Let me comment on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
They were progressing before halftime.
Yeah, it was getting better.
We talked after Florida State how I thought that they grew that day. They made progress.
Definitely.
And you were starting to see Caleb and RJ, Caleb in particular, because I think RJ started doing this sooner. Caleb was starting to have those moments where he's managing the game.
Yeah, look better.
The numbers were great. He was missing a ton of shots, especially inside the arc. He was struggling with a lot of that, and he still is. He was 6 of 15 against State. He's still adjusting to dealing when he gets inside, gets toward the lane, of the length and the athletic ability of big guys in the ACC. That'll come eventually. It's not there yet. But he had been making progress. They as a team have been making progress. The consistency that Armando Bacot brings to the court every game is something that is huge for them. So in winning those games, winning ugly against Notre Dame, in hindsight is okay, because you got to win. They weren't winning those games a year ago. The fact that Leakey was the guy that hit the bucket to win, I think was huge. And then they go to Miami and they struggle, but they win. And Leakey has 16 points, and he's the one who makes the pass to Andrew. Andrew gets the bucket. The older guys were getting it done when they had to get it done, even though the team wasn't playing very well. I remember people texting me during the Miami game saying this team's worse than last year.
Oh, I saw a ton of tweets about that, yeah.
And I said no, because I don't think last year's team ever really had stretches where you could say it's growing. It had stretches where it played well, but it never really had stretches where it was growing, because they had so many injuries, they had so many issues, and they were waiting for Cole to come back. And all that talk about, well, will Cole even come back? They just didn't really grow. They got better in some areas, but they didn't really grow. This team has been growing in very small increments. What they've done since halftime against Wake Forest, they've taken much bigger steps forward. It's the commitment to getting the ball inside. Their obvious strength is scoring inside and rebounding. Those are the 2 number 1 attributes that this team has, the top 2 attributes they have. And I asked Roy after the game Saturday about the fact that since halftime against Wake Forest, 87 of their 99 field goal attempts have been inside the arc. And he quickly said, yes, I like that, but I want us to be more balanced. And I'm totally with him on that. But sometimes you gotta strip it down and just say, okay, let's just focus on this one thing. And then you grow from there, right? Well, the focus was be married to going inside. Recognize this is the strength of the team. This is who we are. And then we could put all of our other parts, attach them to that. But everything must be attached to the interior. And I think we've seen them do that. Now let's see what they do at Pitt. Pitt's not great inside. They're not a great perimeter shooting team. They do a lot of things with effort, energy, and scrappiness that can give a young team some issues. So we'll see how they handle that and then move forward. But if they can execute, if they have the mission that they had the last three halves they played when they go to Pittsburgh, I give them a good chance to win that game, because if Carolina is executing down low and Armando's getting dudes on his hip and Dayron is a beast down low, I'm not sure Pitt can stop that. They might alter it some, but they're not going to stop that. And you got to convert a lot, because if you're hitting a lot of 2-pointers, you got to make up for the threes their team hit. But for them, it's a good thing that Pitt's not a great 3-point shooting team.
Yeah. AJ, I'm going to just run through the next 4 after that 3, just so people can kind of get understanding of how daunting this 7-game stretch is for Carolina. And like you said, it starts with this 3-game road stretch coming up. But even after that Duke game, Carolina's got Miami at home. I mean, if Miami gets Chris Likes back, who knows how much better that team will be. And then you got to go at UVA, which we talked about a little bit off camera, but that's just not a place Carolina's won a lot of basketball games in a long time. And then you got Virginia Tech at home and Louisville at home. So this is a really tough 7-game stretch. The last thing I kind of want to ask you before we wrap this thing up, you look at where Carolina was at, let's say a month ago. You know, you look at some of those opponents who they were playing. Notre Dame, not great. Miami, not great. Syracuse, not great. Wake Forest, pretty bad. I mean, State at this point, you know, maybe a couple months ago was looking okay, but State right now hasn't won a game in a while. You're looking at this tough stretch coming up. Do you think Carolina enters this tough stretch when you look at how much better they've been playing as of recently, 5 out of the last 6, like we've said? Do you think Carolina's kind of entering this stretch at the right time? And let's say if this stretch came up a month ago, you know, where that Carolina team was at, I think you're looking at this and going, man, they might be lucky to win 1 game. You know what I mean? I think, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, it seems to be a little bit different now. And even not just from our perspective, but from the team's perspective, they just seem to be a lot more confident going into games.
Well, what did we say kind of privately after the Clemson game was postponed? That was good for Carolina, because Clemson was probably going to win 2 straight in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, that's
now they didn't play that game. They ended up getting Syracuse to come in, a game that was postponed earlier that brought Notre Dame to town. So that was probably good timing, because they weren't shooting at all from the perimeter. And you know, maybe the Syracuse zone would have given them some trouble. I don't know. I think you're right. This kind of works out better for them to have this stretch now than if they had it a month ago.
Yeah, because
I think that the teams that they're playing, you mentioned, you know, UVA, they're really, really good, but there's a lot of old guards in front of them right now in these games, and old guards have given this team trouble.
Yeah, they really have.
I could go back to Texas. I could go back to Iowa. I mean, Jordan Bohannon, they'll be 24 in June. Watch Iowa play, man. That's just a mature team.
That is looking,
they gave them fits. Carolina had a really nice stretch offensively in the middle, but they were awful defensively in that game. You know, Georgia Tech with Alvarado. Remember how well Beverly played in the first game when Carolina played State. So old guards are giving them trouble, which is why Chris Likes could be a factor. Miami can come in and beat them if Likes is healthy.
Yeah, because that's just a different team with him on it. Yeah,
I mean, he's nearly done it in that building before against a much better Carolina team. So Carolina's trending in the right direction. This is a good time to play these games. You want to be tested to see where they are. We know that they can handle the group that they played now. And the one loss in the 6-game stretch was a very competitive game at what might be the best team in this conference. And Florida State might be the team built to make the longest run in the NCAA tournament. Although the more I watch UVA, the more I really
look good. Yeah, they look good. Yeah.
So toss UVA out of the equation until they play FSU again. You know, it's conceivable that on an individual game basis, Carolina can go into each game and think, got a great chance to win. And fans should think they have a really good chance to win. But only if the last 3 halves mean something. We said last week after the Wake game, was Caleb Love's performance a flare-up or the beginning of something different? Well, they have 3 halves now. 3 halves doesn't override everything else that we've seen this season. So that's why this is a really challenging game for them on a lot of levels going up to Pittsburgh. If they handle that, then they get a week off unless the ACC throws them a game at some point in between. They get a week off before they go down to Little John. Clemson is just struggling.
They are.
But they'll give you a kudos to NC State for coming out of the quarantine where they couldn't practice until Friday and played very well given the circumstances. Most teams, look what Virginia did against Gonzaga after a quarantine.
I know.
Look at what Clemson did against Virginia after a quarantine. A lot of teams have not played well when they've been off, when they've had to pause. Clemson has given up 80 or more points in the 3 games since it came back, and it only given up as many as 70 twice before that.
Mm-hmm.
So Duke has struggled too. Yeah, since it had to hit a pause for a while. It's been struggling all year anyway.
Yeah.
But Duke is still Duke. When they go to Cameron, I think that
That's
even
going
with
to be a good
nobody
game.
there, that's going to be one of those games where, kind of like the last year when Carolina was struggling, Duke went to the Dean Dome and it was an overtime
Great game. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you could never really base things solely on how they're playing, although Duke's only averaging about 68 points a game during this losing stretch, and they're shooting about 29% from three. So they got a lot of issues. But Carolina has had these issues too, and they've worked through them. So by the time they play Duke, Duke may have already worked through some stuff. Who knows? They'll get a few more games with Johnson in there, and they might even be a little bit better.
Exactly.
I think that right now we're doing a podcast talking about the next 3 and the next 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really, if you want to understand this team because of its youth and because they got a lot of guys that still need to get better, let's judge them on an individual game basis. Get to the Pitt game, see how they play against Pitt, and if they connect a lot of stuff to the state game, which was connected to the second half against Wake, then you're seeing verifiable growth. Then they have a week off, and the challenge will be playing after being off for a week. What do they connect when they go down to Little John? Right now, it's about connecting stuff. And it's about Caleb Love shooting a high percentage, making better decisions when he gets into the lane, and about the turnovers going down. They still gave up 17 points off turnovers to State.
Yep.
You got to cut that number down. We've talked before, Mac Brown, we're using a Mac Brown reference for basketball, but the football team had problems this past season when after a turnover or like the block punts or something like that, Matt called it sudden change defense. They didn't do a good job keeping teams out of the end zone or from being productive after
not at all.
Suddenly the defense has to get on the field. Well, Carolina's sudden change defense, if you're going to use that terminology, has not been really good because the way the turnovers have been, they've led to a lot of easy points. They've got to minimize that. And if they minimize that and they stay committed to the interior, and when they take perimeter shots, they've been at about 36% as a team since the Georgia Tech game. If they can be at 36% the rest of the way and be really, really efficient inside, this team has a chance to win a lot of games.
Exactly.
And of course, the turnovers, Caleb and the turnovers. That's how you're going to sort of watch this team progress. That's what you need to look for.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a great way to put it. I was going to kind of ask you about that, but you kind of already answered my question of like, if you're a Carolina fan, what are you kind of looking for that Carolina needs to do to win these games? And like you mentioned, you got to have Caleb Love producing. You got to cut down on the turnovers. You got to have guys like Armando Bacot being as efficient as he has down low. Guys like Day'Ron Sharp stepping up. I mean, Carolina beat State by 10, and Garrison Brooks, yes, on Saturday was. I kind of forgot he played at some parts of the game. Like, oh yeah, Garrison Brooks out there. You know what I mean? So Carolina's winning these games without guys that I think before the season you would have said, okay, if Garrison Brooks isn't having a great year, this team's really, really going to struggle. But it hasn't been the case. I mean, they're winning games and getting things from guys that maybe you didn't expect before the season to have as big of an impact as they've had. So
The Garrison Brooks topic is something that's kind of hard to explain because I'm not sure.
I'm not sure what it is either.
Well, Garrison, I feel for him.
Oh, I do too.
I've covered Garrison for several years. Garrison's a really nice kid.
He is, yep.
And he has tremendous reverence for what this program stands for its history.
He gets it for sure.
I remember last year when he had a big game at State, I asked him in the locker room after the game, I said, there's some people throwing around names like Hansbrough and Luke May because he was big time in PNC Arena.
Yeah.
About what they did in this building. And he was like, you could tell that he was thoroughly touched by the comparison because he has so much reverence for everything.
He understands it. Yeah.
He totally gets what's on the front of his jersey, and he plays for that. And I feel for him right now because I think being named preseason ACC Player of the Year is something that's tough for a lot of guys to live up to.
Oh, yeah, no way around
I don't know if he's been trying to live up to it or not. I don't really know what's been going through his mind. I know he had some struggles. And when Roy took him out of the starting lineup, he even said, it does kind of hurt because, I'm a senior and a freshman starting in front of me. But he's got a starting job back. And he does a lot of things well on the floor. He was a very important player when he was a freshman, sophomore, in helping be a glue part to what those guys were doing. Maybe that's his role moving forward. I don't really know. I just think that right now, when he gets the ball in the post and there's another post player down there, it's like the second defender's always there. Last year when he went on that run, the four was usually Justin Pierce on the court because Armando was playing about 22 minutes a game or so
Yeah.
last year, but Armando was always on the court when Garrison got his break. So if Garrison was at 34 minutes a game and Armando was playing 22, that means he was on the court with Armando for maybe 16 minutes a game.
Mm-hmm.
That means the rest of the time Garrison was on the court, there was no other real four.
Mm-hmm.
So the second defender was further away because Pierce was on the perimeter so much.
That's a good point.
So Garrison had more room to move. He had more room to get a guy on his hip, make a move. A lot of his game was finesse inside too. So he was just more efficient. Now it seems like it's kind of cluttered in there for him some. And he stepped his game away, and he has not been hitting that 15-footer
jump
as
shots,
much as we were told that he might hit the 15-footer before the season. You know, if he knocks a few of those down, boom, maybe things start to click for him.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think right now he's still kind of figuring out how he fits in there. We kind of saw that in Asheville. Like even though he had 18, I think against Texas or Stanford, but it still didn't seem like the way he got 18 a year ago.
No.
So, but what's important here, and for people to understand, is that as well as Carolina has played lately, and the fact they've won 5 out of 6, there's a lot more growing for this team that it can do. Mm-hmm. Caleb could get a lot more efficient. He could manage the game a lot better. Anthony Harris, as he continues to get kind of worked in, and Royce tightens the rotation a little bit more, which you know is coming. And then if Garrison could figure out his groove with this bunch, it could take them up another notch. So I'm not saying that they will grow a ton, but they can grow a ton. And that's part of what you need to look for. Don't just focus on winning and losing. Focus on the growth of this group as they move forward, because there's a lot of room. They're here, and where they can be is over here, but there's a lot of stuff that has to take place. And they've got, 12 regular season games left to do it, and then the conference tournament. So there's still time. Roy's teams usually show their most growth when you get into February and through February. And I have a sneaky suspicion this team's going to do the same thing.
I agree.
History kind of demands that we see that.
Exactly. I mean, if you've watched Carolina basketball for a long time, you know how Roy Williams teams like to peak. It's usually, over these next few months is when you're going to see Carolina start playing its best basketball if history has taught us anything. So yeah, Jay, I think we can just wrap it up there, man. Like I think we kind of broke it down. I mean, tough stretch coming up, but with the way Carolina's playing, I think in a lot of reasons to be kind of optimistic about this team going in and picking up some big wins over some of the ACC's best teams this year. So it's going to be an exciting stretch. And as always, guys, we'll have it all covered here at Tar Heel Illustrated and at our website, tarheelillustrated.com. But AJ, I'm gonna let you run, man. I know you got plenty of work to get done, and I know the grind doesn't stop for you, to say the least. So.
A lot of travel Tuesday. Traveling the day of a game is tough. So I got a lot of stuff getting done between now and I go to bed Monday night.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
That's why I need you to send me that football piece. Hopefully,
Monday. I got you, man. Yeah, we've got some. We got to talk to the football guys last week, so y'all stay tuned for that as well, as we've got some really good pieces coming out.
You'll see me at an airport near you editing Jacob's piece.
Yeah, making sure I ain't got no typos in there or anything like that. But
I'm the one that needs that. I'm the typo king.
Hey, man, as much as you write, it's not impossible not to. You know what I mean? You can't be perfect, but as always, guys, if you've enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to share this video, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.